I am director of sustainability for Canon Design. Canon Design is a top 10 architecture firm here in the United States, and we've really been pushing an aggressive approach to sustainability because we feel the urgency of climate change is demanding it, really. So, what I'm going to show you today is a bit of a work in progress. It's things that we're working out with our clients, so it's constantly evolving and changing, and I'm excited to share it with you today. And I want to start with a pretty big announcement, which is that we have failed as environmentalists. 50 years of a modern environmental movement, and we ended up in the exact spot we did not want to be. And I'm not just talking about this. What I'm talking about is that we've gotten to a place in the climate and around the world where we knew was coming, and yet we didn't seem to be able to stop it. I'll give you an example. This was the cover of the New York Times. This is June 1988. I had just graduated high school, if that gives you any sense of scale here. And Jim Hansen, chief climatologist at NASA, had testified in front of our Congress. And in it, he said that if we don't do something about climate change soon, we were going to feel the effects within about 3 decades. The headline at the time was, "Sharp cut in burning of fossil fuels is urged to battle the shift in climate." And nearly 33 years, almost to the day, this was the cover of the New York Times. Climate change comes for all of us, just as we predicted. So that's what I mean when I say that we have failed. A month later, the IPCC's final 6th assessment report came out, what's been called a code red for humanity. And we've already learned that there's enough carbon in the air to blow us past our budget of 1.5 degrees. So this is a problem. It seems that despite 50 years of warnings, 50 years of urgency, 50 years of demands for action, all we've really done is we've gotten a bunch of paint colors that are named after climate change. And unfortunately, yes, this is real. So should this be the color of the year then? It's confounding to be an environmentalist and have dedicated your life to this, and I'm sure you're feeling all the same way, to know that we've ended up exactly where we didn't want to be. What I've learned as an architect is that a building is not just a building. A building is actually an interconnected part of something bigger than itself. It's part of a community. It's part of infrastructure. It's part of a network. It's a part of legacy systems. And so we're not going to solve this problem one building at a time. We need to holistically look at the entire system. And all of our buildings are based on a set of assumptions that are no longer true. And in fact, they might never have been true. And yet, at a time that this is going on, we are about to build an unprecedented amount of stuff in the world. We are going to double the world's building stock in the next 40 years. So that's essentially building an area the equivalent of New York City every 5 weeks for the next 40 years. And I'm not talking about this New York. I'm talking about today's New York, the big, bustling New York. So we're going to build that every 5 weeks for the next 40 years. And if we do it the old-fashioned way, we're going to destroy our planet. And at the same time this is going on, China is building 50 dams a week. They're building one bridge a month. I mean, they used more concrete in 2 years than the United States did in all of the 20th century. And so we need to find a new way to build. And I often feel like this is us. We're kind of swinging on our swing, completely unaware of what's going on behind us. Okay. Every president, every United States president since John F. Kennedy has known about the threat of climate change, and yet we've done literally nothing. And it's not like you weren't warned. We've been sneaking it into movies for decades trying to tell everybody, and it still didn't work. And so this is kind of where my mindset is now as an architect, that the traditional code-based building is bad. It's degenerative. It's consumptive. It wastes a lot of material. It causes a lot of damage. And that rating systems like LEED and BREEAM have been trying to be less bad. But we don't want to be bad. We want to move into that upper right quadrant. We want to be restorative. We want to be regenerative. That means we need to design for human health, for wellness, for restoration. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to build the way nature builds. And so I'm going to skip this. Sorry for time. We need to get to 0 by 2050. And really, we need to make 80% of those cuts by 2030. And 2030 is not 10 years away. It's 90 months away. And so we have no time. We've been telling our clients that if they have a 2030 plan or a 2040 plan or a 2050 plan, that's a today plan. They need to put it in action today. So dust off whatever your climate plan is and start putting it into action. In addition, as architects, I've realized that anytime we demolish an existing building, anytime we build a dumb glass box, or anytime we're not targeting net zero, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody, anytime we do these things, that is really a form of climate denial. In other words, it's denying the reality that's facing us. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Sorry. At the same time we've done this, we've also been polluting our air. What we found is that just by simply putting air purifiers in classrooms, we can boost student performance more than reducing class size. It's a simple, effective thing that we can do. And we're able to monitor and measure the air in ways that we never were even 5 years ago. We've also seen that air affects everyone. In fact, living near a coal-fired power plant affects babies in utero with neurotoxins and neurotransmitters. And of course, we fill our buildings with more cancer-causing chemicals that further impedes our ability to think. We've also seen that on bad air days, that surgery outcomes get worse. On bad air days, crime goes up. And on bad air days, the stock market underperforms. We've also seen that the general thinking in a hospital is that it's sealed up, no outside air, sealed up windows, access to the outside. Yet we feel that everyone deserves these things, right? Everyone deserves fresh air, view, access to nature. And this seems universal. At a time when all of my clients are asking me about how technology could start to affect the construction industry, the technologies they're focusing on are all digital. But there is another technology that we are ignoring, which is biology. Biology is a technology. In fact, it's an old 4 billion-year-old technology that we should embrace. So at a time that we're looking to build healthy buildings, and there's been a lot of arguments about what defines a healthy building, really nature is the ultimate technology to help us achieve regenerative, healthy buildings. I'm going to skip these too, sorry. Okay. So what does that really mean for us? It means that because the modern environmental movement has failed, and because we've been warning people about these things and it hasn't changed, and we're looking to build healthy, technologically filled buildings, we need to change how we think about these buildings. Sorry, I'm skipping again. I want to get to the good stuff. Okay. Think about how we measure success in a building. Sometimes it's cost per square foot. Sometimes it's revenue per square foot. Sometimes it's payback or ROI. But how should we measure success in a building? Should we also measure patient recovery times, stress reduction, staff retention? Those things also have value. Those things are also important. Should we measure that? And how could we measure success in a building? Couldn't we also measure how much energy it produces, how much carbon it sequesters, or how many species it provides a habitat for? Those things also have a value. So I started to look at the metrics that most architects and engineers use to measure success in our buildings, and they tend to be very technical. They also tend to focus on the negative. We usually measure the bad stuff, right? We don't measure how much fresh air there is. We measure the pollutants in the air. And we like these metrics. We understand these metrics, but this is not what our clients talk about. What our clients talk about is different, right? Our clients care about money. CapEx, OpEx, IRR, ROI, ROR, all those crazy acronyms the financial people use. So we have two different stakeholders, architects and owners, speaking two different languages. And then if you're designing hospitals, what the doctors and staff care about are the patients. Those are their metrics of success. So now we have three different groups speaking three different languages. What if we were to find a common language, a way to show that our metrics are actually wrong and that we need a better way to measure this? And so it made us realize that what we needed was like a missing link, something that connects all three of these people. And for us, we call this designing to outcomes, or as Simon Sinek would say, starting with the why. So that's what we've been doing with our clients. We work with them to map out what are the outcomes that are important to everybody, and then we design to those outcomes. So if you're designing a hospital, you're designing to boost patient recovery times. If you're designing a school, you're designing to boost student test scores. If you're designing an office, you're designing to boost collaboration. And we found that by designing to these outcomes, suddenly we get everybody on the same page and everybody's excited about what the building's design, and this does not get then cut from the budget. In addition, everything that we show them now has a payback. because these things have a value. I'm going to cut this too. Okay. So then what this really means is that we have to look to incorporate nature as a technology to solve a lot of these problems and design to these outcomes. I'm skipping again, sorry. Okay. So for me, what was next then was obvious, that we needed to find a way to design with nature, that we need to design a facility that way the more time you spend in it, the better you feel, a building that's truly regenerative. The idea that the hospital itself would be part of the healing, that somehow you would walk in and this would activate your brain and stimulate you in a way. And this is really a mix of lots of other disparate movements that are going on with evidence-based design, neuroarchitecture, biophilic design, sensory design. But this idea that we would build a building that would make you well, really, that healing and curing would be part of the solution. And it's broken into essentially 6 buckets: systems, senses, cycles, signals, biomes, and genomes. And what we found is that in doing this, we can boost student test scores, we can boost patient immune response, we can boost staff retention. And I'm going to explain them very, very quickly. But systems essentially refers to designing for the 12 physiological systems in the human body. Senses refers to designing for not the 5, but all 30 human senses. Cycles refers to designing for the 24 circadian hours in a day, those circadian rhythms that trigger our immune response. Signals refers to the 12 neurotransmitters in our brain. Biomes refers to the microbiomes in our gut and in our head. And genomes refers to the DNA molecules that make up all life on Earth. And what we found is that by designing for these systems, we can suddenly create a facility that stimulates serotonin to make you feel calm, or boost your endorphins to raise your immune response. And this becomes a very powerful tool. So working hand in hand with our doctors, we're able to design these facilities that trigger your biology, that trigger you in a way that heal you beyond anything that we've ever done before. So while we're still building net zero energy buildings, of course, we're also then adding in this layer of biology as a technology and designing to these specific outcomes. I have a lot more slides, but I'm out of time. So that's really what I wanted to share with you today. And again, sorry that I can't be there in person, but this is what we've been working on with our clients. And through this lens, we've been designing cancer centers for the future. Cancer centers where you walk in and it boosts your physiological response and makes you feel well. And the whole thing, as I said, is a giant experiment that we're testing out with real clients right now. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for coming.
Think big.